How does an empire that fought almost continuously for 6 centuries, both in the East and the West, manage to survive without going bankrupt? For 600 years, the Ottoman Empire fought kings in the West, sultans in the East, countless republics, crusaders, rebels, and rising European powers. It conquered countries, lost countries, and redrew their borders again and again. It marched its armies from the Balkans to the deserts of Arabia, and endured severe crises. Yet despite all this, it achieved something that very few empires in history ever managed. It did not go bankrupt. Because the Ottoman Empire was not merely a state that fought wars. It built a system that could continuously finance war. This is about money, power, and the systems that shape history. Welcome to Thrones of Finance. The Ottoman Empire ruled vast territories from approximately 1299 to 1922. This magnificent empire remained standing longer than Rome's Byzantium and longer than Britain's famous kingdom, longer than almost all the states whose names you commonly hear in the modern world. But what truly deserves attention is not the length of time it has ruled. The real question that must be asked is this: how did an empire that was almost constantly at war fail to collapse under financial pressure and mounting expenses? In the West, there is a commonly misunderstood belief. Empires fall because they are defeated on the battlefield. History tells the opposite story. What brings states to an end is often not wars themselves, but financial mistakes, short-sighted leadership, and failed logistics. The Ottomans realized this very early in their history. Instead of building a classical system based on heavy taxation and salaried armies like European kingdoms, they constructed a far more efficient structure in which war financed itself. Yet before understanding this system, one must first understand what kind of empire the Ottoman state was, contrary to what most people think they already know. In the West, the Ottomans are often described through memorized and imagination-satisfying images. Sultans, endless treasuries, harems filled with beautiful women, and a fearsome army. These images may appear attractive from the outside, but they are not the elements that kept such a vast empire, spread across an enormous geography, alive for centuries. The Ottomans emerged as a small frontier principality in northwestern Anatolia. Their leader, Osman I, commanded only a few thousand mounted soldiers. Yet he possessed an advantage far more valuable than numbers, being in the right place at the right time. The Byzantine Empire was slowly weakening. The Mongols' ambitions in the region had faded, and the army under Osman's command stood before a unique opportunity to expand. These opportunities for conquest were not merely military successes. They were also financial achievements and sources of increasing revenue. Because every conquest meant new land, new resources, new products, and a new population that would pay taxes. The first key to the Ottoman Empire's successful financial system lies precisely here. From the very beginning, war was not an expense, but a source of income. With the conquest of Bursa in 1326, later to become the imperial capital for many years, and the new territories taken in Europe during the 1350s, the Ottomans were no longer a frontier principality. They had become a rising power controlling almost all the trade routes between Europe and Asia. In the medieval world, this was equivalent to controlling the world's metro systems. Any merchant traveling from Cairo to Budapest, from Venice to Iran, had to pass through Ottoman lands. Winning a war requires large amounts of food, metal, and manpower. Perhaps the Ottomans did not possess more of these than others, but they had a unique force that kept this young and powerful empire standing: cash flow. The empire was built upon the intersection of the most critical and richest trade points of the pre-modern world. From silk to spices, from carpets to copper, countless goods passed through Ottoman territories. Anyone who passed through these lands and engaged in trade was inevitably taxed. Yet a strong revenue system alone cannot explain 6 centuries of victories and conquests. History is full of Eastern and Western empires that generated great income, but still collapsed under military expenditures. What set the Ottomans apart was the difference in their financial structure. The Ottomans transformed their army into an institution that financed itself. It was rare for soldiers in the Ottoman army to be paid directly from the state treasury. The army functioned almost like a self-operating, self-charging battery. The most striking example of this was the Timar system, one of the most important innovations in Ottoman history and perhaps one of the least understood by the West. The largest expense of any state is salaries. Modern states spend fortunes to keep professional armies together. The Ottomans solved this problem at its root. They did not pay their soldiers salaries. Instead, they granted them the right to collect taxes. A timar was a designated tax district. A cavalryman known as a sipahi collected taxes from this area. In return, he provided his own equipment, fed his horse, and arrived ready for the war. He did not receive a salary. The soldier financed himself. This system reduced state expenses, encouraged soldiers to invest in local stability, and allowed the emperor to mobilize quickly without emptying its treasury. Such a system might appear risky by today's standards, yet in the 14th and 15th centuries it functioned remarkably well, rendering Ottoman wars nearly cost-free, at little more than a marginal expense. European armies relied on expensive knights and mercenaries who demanded payment before marching to war. An army's loyalty was worth only as much as the gold in the king's treasury. In the Ottoman system, by contrast, soldiers' income continued even in times of peace. Living off their share of taxes from conquered lands, soldiers were not a burden on the Sultan's treasury during peacetime. As a result, war did not strain the budget. It activated the system. The second major innovation that completed this structure was an institution frequently mentioned in the West but rarely understood in essence: the Janissaries. The Janissaries can be described as Ottoman's knights. They were educated, disciplined, and administratively loyal only to the Sultan. What made them financially unique was how they were recruited. They were gathered through the devshirme system, educated by the state, and tied directly to the center. Ethically controversial, this system was financially ingenious. The state distributed the high cost of training elite soldiers across society, while the Timar system made the cavalry low-cost and self-sustaining. The Janissaries turned the infantry into a low-cost yet highly efficient force. Together, they brought the Ottomans extraordinary success for centuries while placing almost no burden on the treasury. The system sustained itself. And the Ottomans went even further, adopting an even more powerful and equally unconventional principle: war financed war. Every conquest meant new taxpayers, new ports, and new trade routes. Each campaign strengthened the financial foundation of the next. The geopolitical position of the lands on which the Ottoman Empire was built was the golden key to this system. The Straits, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Red Sea, Egypt, and the caravan routes stretching into Iran were all under Ottoman control. Every trade transaction and every tax collected ensured a strong cash flow. By the 1500s, the Ottoman Empire had become one of the richest and most powerful states in the world. State monopolies, such as salt, tobacco, and coffee, further strengthened this power. Additionally, semi-autonomous states that were not directly governed but were taxed generated high revenue at minimal cost. The greatest mastery, and at the same time the source of vulnerability, was the Ottomans' avoidance of debt for centuries. For a long time there was no national debt, no bonds, no foreign creditors. But the world changed. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Europe industrialized, trade shifted to the seas, the Timar system collapsed, the Janissaries became polarized, and rebellions began. The ingenious system the Ottomans had built began to fail to keep pace with a changing world. The empire turned to what it had avoided for centuries: foreign debt. In the 1800s, high-interest loans were taken from European banks. A debt spiral began. Of course, there were many factors that paved the way to this collapse. However, perhaps the most decisive was the rise of incompetent sultans to power. This subject is deep enough to deserve a video of its own. Thus, in 1881, the Ottoman finances came under the control of a foreign commission. 6 centuries of financial independence came to an end. There are lessons to be drawn from the Ottoman Empire's journey from nothing to the peak, and from the peak to collapse. Empires are not destroyed by defeats on the battlefield, but by wrong decisions made at the financial table. The Ottoman Empire stood for 6 centuries because its financial system was disciplined. It collapsed because that system no longer worked. History does repeat itself, but it only crushes those who fail to learn from it. If this video gives you a new perspective, subscribe to the channel. History still owes you many answers.